Hi, everyone. Welcome. This is Aset here at the Goddess Inside. And today I have a very special guest with me again, Egyptologist and documentary filmmaker, Curtis Ryan Woodside. And we are going to be sharing with you some interesting information about ancient Egypt and the worship of the ancestors. So hi, Curtis.
Hi, Aset. It's so nice to be back on chatting to you.
It is nice to have you back. I love all of the information that you are always sharing about the history of ancient Egypt, and I don't know how you keep all the names straight, but you do, and I appreciate that.
It's difficult sometimes. Sometimes you're busy speaking and you actually cannot remember the name, and you just have to say that one who looked like that or did that, and usually we get it. So
Yes. Yes. Well, it makes me think of, our topic today, of the ritual of honoring the ancestors that the kings performed within their temples and, the remembering of the name and how important names are to the ancient
yeah,
Egyptians. And when you knew the name of something, you could enliven it. And then I love Hollywood because then, later we see in like Peter Pan, Tinkerbell, she's losing her energy and everyone has to say, I do believe in fairies, I do believe in fairies, and then she gets her spark of life back and she's able to flutter around and do all the Tinkerbell things. So
it's that
um
faith.
yes, it's
Yeah,
that faith that feeds the ka, the spirit. So
yeah.
that's what we're going to be talking about today. And both Curtis and I have some slides that we want to share with you. And I think that what we'll do first of all, because you are my guest, I would like to have you go first and share a little bit about the history of ancestor worship in ancient Egypt.
Great, great. Well, when we were discussing doing this topic, um, I immediately knew exactly which images I wanted to show. So we'll go back to, let's start with Ahmose Nefertari. So can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay, great. So we have over here on the left, we have Ahmose and his mother, Ahmose Nefertari. Now, in the 18th dynasty, the beginning of the 18th dynasty, end of the 17th dynasty, Egypt was split up and being ruled by a foreign power called the Hyksos. Now, Ahmose Nefertari, being the mother, gave birth to Pharaoh Ahmose, who eventually defeated the Hyksos, chased them out of Egypt, and put Egypt back together, basically. So, Ahmose Nefertari, being the mother, was venerated because you need to have, so without this woman, that is why she was venerated. And through the 18th, 19th, and 20th dynasty, Ahmose Nefertari was worshipped for being the woman who gave birth, because she is, in essence, the great ancestor of all new Egyptians. So Ahmose Nefertari, a very important woman. She's shown with jet black skin, which is to show that she did pass on. But we do have some hints that Ahmose Nefertari was actually of Nubian descent. So there's a double meaning to the color of her skin compared to the other Egyptians shown on the screen. So she was venerated in Deir el-Medina, which is the small village where workers were at, making tombs for the pharaohs in the 18th and 19th dynasty. And at Deir el-Medina, because Ahmose is basically the founder of Deir el-Medina, we see her being worshipped, Ahmose Nefertari. And you'll see there's these little pyramid-shaped buildings at Deir el-Medina, where you would go to give offerings to the deceased. person in your family. So it's worshiping your ancestors continually. You have to feed their ka, their spirit. So it's keeping that memory alive of your ancestors. And Ahmose Nefertari and Ahmose were worshipped even by Seti I and Ramses II, which Aset will tell us a little about Seti worshipping previous pharaohs as ancestors. Even though there was 200 years between Seti I and Ramses II, they were worshipping Ahmose Nefertari here at the back and Ahmose, and here is Seti, and behind is young Prince Ramses. And we see them very clearly worshipping the great ancestors of the pharaohs who reunited Egypt. But apart from pharaoh worship, we also have just the everyday person worshiping their ancestors. You know, like, let's go back and think about, okay, let's go and leave a food offering for grandma, you know, something like that. So here in the tomb of Sennacherib at Deir el-Medina is such a clear sign showing ancestor worship. We see Sennacherib here standing fully upright with his wife behind, with his hands raised to the night sky, with sort of the moon, the sun shown here, and only 7 stars in the sky, clearly indicating 7 ancestors of Sennacherib that he wanted to pay tribute to in his tomb, because once he died, it's believed you went up into the sky and became one with the stars, which is why there's 7 of his family's stars. And what's interesting here is Sennacherib is actually shown alive in his tomb, worshipping his ancestors. His wife is shown wearing an incense perfume cone, which is usually in a tomb. When we see it, it means that that person is deceased. So Sennacherib's wife, Nefret, here's her name above, died before him, and that's why she's got the cone on her head. And they are giving, you know, with the hands raised, worshipping their ancestors. As Aset said, it was very important to worship your ancestors. So we have here a stela of Ramosa from the 19th dynasty. And what's interesting is, again, Ramosa's wife is shown as deceased, as she's got the cone on her head. Ramosa is shown as alive. Even here, Ramosa's children who are alive are giving offerings to their parents who are deceased. So it's a clear indication of some sort of cultic worship for your ancestor, which was continuing to keep their spirit alive, because that's kind of what all the ancient Egyptians wanted, was to keep your spirit alive, keep your name out there. So that's a very clear indication of that. And then another one from Deir el-Medina is a statue of Pendua and Nefertari. And on the back of the statue, it's so interesting because you can see here are 4 daughters and 1 son of the couple. And 2 of the daughters only are shown with the cones. The other 2 daughters do not have cones, and the son does not have a cone on his head, which means that 2 of the daughters were already deceased by the time this statue was made to worship the spirit of Nefertari and Pendua. So it's so interesting that even the deceased person was still shown on the back of the statue, because it was so important to them to keep that energy going to worship your ancestors even in the afterlife. So it's just a very interesting scene. If I zoom in here, you'll see the 2 women with the crowns. The other ones do not have them. So, you know, even this is not a thing just from the 19th dynasty or the 18th dynasty as well. The Old Kingdom, which we see here, is the mortuary temple for Pharaoh Zozo, the builder of the Great Pyramid. Mortuary temples are where they would go and give offerings to keep the spirit of the pharaoh alive, and the pharaoh is sort of like the father of the nation. So he's your ancestor if you're Egyptian. So, you know, the normal people would go into this temple and leave offerings, and just think about the spirit of Zoser. And even the Greeks, about 3,500 years after Zoser, went into the temple and left graffiti and said, "I was astounded by Zoser," which is what he would have wanted. He wanted people to remember his name. So that is showing that it even happened in the Old Kingdom. And here we see the Ramesseum to keep Ramses II's spirit alive. And Aset is going to talk to us a little about Abydos, with Seti and Ramses both having mortuary temples there, as well as in Thebes. So this is a place to come and give offerings to the spirit of your great ancestor. And Ramses II was known as the great ancestor to all Egyptians after he died. And Aset is going to show us the symbol for worshiping, the symbol for praying in a certain area inside the temple of Abydos, which is to tell people this is where you come to worship the spirit of the deceased pharaoh. Yeah, and then just to end my little talk about the deceased ancestor worship, it's just a really cute picture I took at the museum in Turin with a pre-dynastic mummy, naturally preserved, and we see all these children huddling around this mummy, examining it, all so fascinated. And it's weird because it's sort of like our worship for ancestors has not gone away. It's even around to today. 5,000-year-old mummy, modern day kids, and we are still thinking about these people, still giving them tribute, which in a way is ancestor worship itself.
Yeah, because it doesn't, ancestor worship, or, the honoring of the ancestors doesn't always mean that you have to be saying prayers, lighting the incense, bringing the offerings, leaving the water. Sometimes it's just the memory of them that might run through your head of, oh yeah, grandma used to make the best, strawberry pie, and it just reminds me of summertime. And so now every summertime you make grandma's strawberry pie recipe so that you can.
And what does it do for grandma's spirit? What does it do for grandma's spirit? It keeps her spirit alive.
Yes, it keeps her spirit alive. I love that. And, even so, we talk about modern day things. When we get to, okay, so the mortuary temples, were built to honor the deceased king. They were to honor the ancestors, and they were also built to honor the gods. So there were different chapels within those mortuary temples that honored the gods. And so within the mystery of all of this is that when, the ancestors were being honored, well, I'm going to back it up. When the new king was coronated, the ancestors were there for that. And you'll see in the coronation inscriptions and things, there's this procession of ritual that goes along with that. And one of them is presenting the new king not only to the Ennead, all of the great 9 gods, but also presenting the new king to the ancestors and them acknowledging, yes, this is the king of Upper and Lower Egypt. So
yeah, because the pharaoh was the son of the gods, so therefore each pharaoh that succeeded him would be seen as his ancestor.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we're trying to keep this video like to the point for you guys, but we have so much to share, and I'll try to keep mine brief as well. So we'll see if we can make this a full screen for you.
The problem with the Egyptians, the Egyptians put too many details on everything, so we could talk for hours.
I know, there's so much.
That's
But
the
one of the
goal.
things I wanted to point out here is, so this is Seti I's mortuary temple at Abydos, and Curtis showed us Ramesses II's mortuary temple. And if you've ever seen Queen Hatshepsut's mortuary temple at Thebes as well, you will see this type of a staircase, this architectural, like a slide and then the steps. So these are the ways that the spirit of the deceased would be able to rise and ascend up to the gods, up to the sky. And so here you can see that, they can just slide right on up this and meet and join with their ancestors as stars in the heavens, and meet and join with their mother Sopdet, who was a star, and then also to meet and join with Ra, the sun god, up in the heavens as well. So I like this little architectural staircase that has the meaning behind it. And then when you go inside of Seti's mortuary temple, as Curtis was saying, you can see these beautiful carvings over here of this bird. And this is the raket. And this is a bird symbol that is the meaning of it is praise and adoration. And so as you're going here into this temple of Seti I, this is the temple where you are praising and adoring not only the pharaoh Seti I, but also the gods and the ancestors. And so when you go to the left, you enter the temple and here, and you go over then to the left, then you will enter into the what's known as the Gallery of Lists. And so this is one of several king's lists that are preserved for us. And you'll see the king's names in their cartouches over here on this wall. I'll show you in a minute. And some names over here, and you'll see Seti and Ramses paying homage to these kings, their ancestors. And so what the priests in this particular temple would do is each and every morning, they would awaken the gods in their chapels, and they would bring them offerings of food and water and milk and honey and incense. And then after they were done awakening the gods, then they would go into Seti's personal chapel within his mortuary temple and do the same thing for him. They would awaken him, they would offer him clothing and food, and then they would take all of these things, and then they would go into the Memphite triads chapels of Nefertem and Ptah Sokar, which was an important part of Seti's past. So he's linking himself also to the Memphite kings, because this is the kind of the area that his family was from. So that the priests would go in there, make the offerings, and then they would take the offerings, and then they would go to the Gallery of Lists, and they would make the offerings in here. Also to the ancestors, and then they would exit out into the Hall of Barks, where then the priests were given their daily rations of the offerings that had been offered to the gods and the deified king and the ancestors, so that nothing went to waste. And so here you can see a close-up of all of the names of the ancestral kings that are being honored in this room by Seti and Ramses II. And it's a very long room because there are a lot of names. I forget how many names are in this. Do you remember, Curtis, how many names are in here?
I'm not sure. I'm really not sure.
Well,
All
I
the
know it's
names
a
are
lot.
there except for like 3. So
Yes, the Amarna kings were not, like Hatshepsut is not listed, Akhenaten is not listed, and Tutankhamun is not. I'm wanting to pronounce it like they do like normally in Egyptology compared to the way that people say it in like the Mughal world. So King Tut. Yeah, King Tut. So there's me and my names, right? And so here we see over on the far left of the screen, we see Ramses over here. And as I was looking for images from Abydos to share here with you all, I noticed that he is holding a scroll. So I checked it out in my book that has the meaning of the inscriptions around it. And at this place, it says that it says these words. It says, reciting praises by the hereditary prince, the eldest, bodily, beloved son of the king Ramses vindicated. And so even within the words here, he's the hereditary prince. So he's
Yes.
honoring, even in the text, it says that he is the descendant of all of these great kings from the past. And I just love that he has the scroll and he's reading the prayers to all.
It's so interesting that you said the translation there was hereditary, because I was reading it as well now. Obviously, hereditary is a simplified word, but the actual inscriptions, if you could go back one slide, Osset.
Oh, yes, do.
There we go. So the actual inscription means from the king's body.
Yes,
So,
right here, right?
Yes. So it's got the feather, the mouth, then and then Nusut Sat. So it's from the king's body, which is how I would read it. Hereditary is actually the correct word for that entire inscription.
Wow.
Just interesting.
Yes, thank you. I'm working on my hieroglyphic knowledge, but thank you. I knew that, I could go back and like figure it out, but yeah, that's fun to see. So right there is where it says the way that it was translated in the book as hereditary and from the king's body, because it says also bodily in her translation, which is very cool.
Yeah.
And so, Seti, I love this image too in this room, because Seti is teaching Ramses, like, this is what you do, son. This is something that you have to do. And so every day you need to be doing these things to honor your ancestors and to keep them alive and to keep everything happy, to keep Ma'at established in our world that we see and in the world that is in the afterlife.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it made sure to, by doing this, it made sure to legitimize Ramses and Seti as fully fledged pharaohs.
Yes. And this is another thing that we were talking about before we started recording, was Seti's name up here in the stars all along in the ceiling, because this is Seti's mortuary temple. So he already is up here in the stars with his ancestors.
And I don't believe I've seen a pharaoh's cartouche on the wall, on the ceiling with stars before. Even in Seti's own tomb, I don't believe his name is on the ceiling. So this is very interesting.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Very cool. Well, now I'm trying to figure out, oh, here we go. Trying to figure out how to stop my share. So, yeah. And then, so something else that I thought was interesting when I was reading about the coronation ritual and how, the king is presented to the ancestors. And I'm a photographer as well. And whenever we shoot a wedding, I always ask the bride and the groom, do you have a memory table? And many times, there will be a table and it will have pictures of grandparents or parents or aunts and uncles that have passed away that are in spirit there to celebrate the wedding, with their grandchild or, their cousin or their niece and nephew. And I love to kind of hang around that area. And invariably, I will find that they do gravitate to that, and they'll stop and maybe they'll share, you'll see them talking. So, that they're, sharing stories about the person that's on the table. And I'm always snapping those pictures because those are the memories of our loved ones who are with us always. Exactly. So, and I love the images that you showed of even the, the children and everybody is still, you know, paying homage to their ancestors.
Yeah. Even a deceased child,
So,
which I find quite interesting, that deceased people could still be shown on the back of a stela or something, giving offerings to the spirit of a person who's only just died.
right. And the thing about that, when I was thinking of it, when you were, showing that slide, was, they believed that basically we're in two
Yeah.
realms. So everything that we're doing in the living world, we'll be doing in, the afterlife as well. So if we're eating food in the afterlife, we need the food. If we are drinking water, we need the water. If we are, wearing clothes, we need the clothes. And if we are supposed to be honoring the ancestors, um, then that's what we would be doing also in the afterlife. So
Yeah, very interesting.
yes, it is. It is. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today to share your knowledge of ancient Egypt with everyone.
No problem, no problem, anytime.
And so I hope that you all have enjoyed. And if you have, then please be sure to go down below in all of the links. You'll see a link to Curtis's, you'll be able to find him on Instagram, his own YouTube channel. He's got a documentary that's going to be in a film festival, so you'll want to be sure to check that out. And then also Curtis has a really great Patreon account so that you can help support his work. And by being a patron, you can be in on all of the little behind the scenes things and exclusive things, and as he's putting things together, which is really fun to be a part of. So I hope that you will go check that out. And then of course you can check out my Patreon as well, where you learn a little bit more about the mystery. So nice blend of the history and the mystery, to keep
Exactly.
all of your, yeah, all of your Egyptian studies in Ma'at in balance with each other. So
That's the dream. Keep it in balance.
keeping everything in balance, yes. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Curtis, for joining me. And I hope that you all enjoy everything about today.